I'm really, really pleased to be joined this morning by Joe Glover, who's the co-founder of the Marketing Meetup. Joe, thanks for doing this. I really appreciate your time.
Not at all. No, it's a real pleasure. From one Midlander to another. So,
Absolutely, absolutely. So we've been having a chat before we've been recording, and I'm really interested in sort of hearing about your story. But a very brief intro for anyone who isn't familiar with the work that you do. So you set up this amazing community of marketers, and we're looking forward to kind of hearing more about that. So Marketing Meetup, you've got great guest speakers that come on, including the likes of Mark Ritson, Rory Sutherland, Seth Godin. So some big, big names there. You've got your podcast series as well. So CMO Mentor, co-hosting on that. So I'm interested in learning some tips for you from you on that as well. You're an advisor for the Co-work Club. And I was looking back through, so you're also a Marketing Academy scholar. So we're big fans of anyone who's done the Marketing Academy scholarship and fellowship. So wow, that's a lot of stuff that you do.
well, yes, yeah, but you can only do one thing at a time, can't you? So you look at the things in front of you and you do those things. So,
Would you help us out and give some insight, if you wouldn't mind, Joe, to your career journey to date? And I think the
Mhm.
question that the audience will be really interested in is kind of what are the key decisions that led you to doing what you're doing now? So going from a kind of marketing career background to now you're doing these incredibly kind of innovative, community-based projects for marketeers. Just would you share a little bit with us about your journey?
Of course. Well, thank you. Thank you for being interested. I think if I was to characterize my journey, it's probably a bit of a survival mechanism for a shy marketer. Um, but I probably need to as you've suggested, sort of take a few steps through the journey. So first things first, I didn't actually I didn't go straight into marketing straight after university. I was actually an SAP consultant. So
Yeah.
I spent my time building technological solutions for FTSE-based companies, doing 14-hour days, and then sleeping in a Holiday Inn in Slough. It was exactly how it sounded, and not for me. But the reason why I took that job was I was sold on the line, um, rightly, to be fair, because it matched my motivation at the time. But I'll be on 100 grand after 5 years,
Yeah.
and that was how I sort of judged my own success. And so I went in, had a horrible time, and stepped out after 6 months. And at the time, it was a slightly controversial move, but I was so grateful for that time. Even though it was a bad experience, it was also an amazing experience because it taught me where I wanted to be. And where I wanted to be was marketing, because during that entire time, I was still blogging about social media at the time.
Okay.
That was my gateway drug into marketing. So I was still writing about it, even while I was an SAP consultant. So I found my first role in marketing as a marketing manager in a three-person company for a conferencing company called Business of Software. And I was really fortunate that the speakers who spoke at that particular conference were people like Rory Sutherland and Seth Godin. And my boss was someone who was very values driven as well. He was a good guy. He was a good human, albeit operating in a different space. Um, I've got to be honest that I don't think I was actually that great at that job, and I actually don't think I was that great at being a marketing manager in the agency I was in afterwards. But what I did recognize in both of those times was that I was young. I knew that I wanted to learn about marketing and meet other marketers, but I'm so shy. I walk into big rooms full of people and I don't want to introduce myself. It's scary. But more than that, when I did some of that courage, I just remember being disappointed and feeling slightly slimy. Those sort of like interactions, where people look at your lanyard or over your shoulder at the next important person, rather than sort of you and your character and sort of caring about you as a person. And so I started running an event in a canteen in Cambridge with three instructions, which was to listen, to say hello, and to be positively lovely. Now, your question was about like the pivots and sort of the big moments as part of this. And I think the important thing for me to say in answer to that He's like, none of this has been on purpose. None of this has been like a big plan. What it has been is a series of steps which have felt right at the right time. So the Marketing Meetup, as an example, started on a train. It was, I established a group on meetup.com, and people found it, they came along, and we ran the first event, and then we ran the second event, and so on and so forth. Probably the next biggest pivot moment as part of the Marketing Meetup was COVID hit. So I've been working for 4 years on it, and I built it to 110 events across the UK mainly, but we just started our first event in New York too. But I was running 6 events a month by myself, going around the country to Newcastle, to Manchester, to Norwich, to London, to Cambridge, etc. Just sort of running these events in the evenings, sometimes even while I was still employed. COVID forced us to change because all of a sudden we couldn't run events anymore. Yeah. So we had to start a webinar program. And so from that point, over the past 5 years, the Marketing Meetup community has grown from 10,000 people to 50,000 people. We've gone from 0 events at the end of COVID to 211 on 6 continents, from nothing to 211,000 followers on social media, etc. But really at the core of everything, and I think maybe this is the most important point that I can leave you with on this particular answer, is that those 2 words, positively lovely, have stayed at the core of everything. And so today I don't really recognize myself as a community builder or anyone doing anything particularly interesting. In fact, even in your question there where you said innovative things, I'm like, cool, that seems funny. What I do recognize myself as is someone who's obsessed with culture. And the thing that I'm obsessed in culture is like creating a space which is welcoming and kind. And I think principally, if I've made any decision in my career, it's simply to care. It's about caring about standards. It's about caring about people. It's about knowing when to not care as well, which is really, really important. But like principally, I think I just care a lot about people, and I want them to have a nice time. And so I feel very fortunate I get to live that life.
Clearly something that's really resonated with your audience. And there's a couple of bits there that struck me, that it was about confidence as well, because if you go back to the earlier days, as you said, you started out as an SAP consultant and then realized it wasn't for you.
Yeah.
Where did you find that confidence at what would have been like really early in your career? I mean, you went to Durham University, I'm sure there was a lot of maybe peer pressure or not to kind of, carry on a certain path, but where did you find that confidence to go, this isn't for me, I'm going to choose a different route?
It's such a good question. I don't think I have a
Or you
solid
just had
answer.
it was just, part of your character?
I think it's part of my character, but probably part of my character which I've had to build. And I think probably it's a result of my character being one which is a bit more quiet and a little bit more, happy in my own company and those kind of vibes. And I think this sounds sad, but I don't think it's supposed to be. Is like you have to get quite used to sort of protecting yourself a little bit in those instances. And if someone says, come on, mate, let's go out for 7 pints tonight. If you don't want to do it, you kind of just have to be able to sort of say no. And I guess I've never really thought about this before, so I'm grateful for you asking, Suzie, because it's such an astute question. But like maybe that muscle being built over the course of time, where sort of being able to say no and sort of be okay with walking my own path to a certain extent. Maybe that's where I got it from. I don't know. I haven't thought about it an awful lot, but
I just thought it's interesting. The other thing that really stood out is for someone who very openly admits that you are quite shy, and the thought of walking into a room full of people and speaking to them is not your personal cup of tea.
Yeah.
How have you, again, it's a confidence thing, I guess, in my head. You've built an incredibly successful community where you're doing hundreds of events. Presumably you are sort of speaking and leading at those events. Is that like a muscle memory that you built up as well as this has got bigger and bigger?
I think it's about finding a dynamic that works for you. And so I could probably answer it in two ways. The first is that I find myself so much more comfortable on stage than I do in a crowd.
Okay.
And it's probably related to the second thing, which is the networking situation for me in my context and how I prefer to do it. It's so much easier if you just got a few people who know your face in the room
Yeah.
and sort of like will come up to you and sort of say hello and say, oh, you know, you're the guy who wears the cap. And like, by the way, this cap isn't like a thing. I don't even wear a cap around the rest of the time. It's just like become a business thing because it's things that people recognize, you know. And so it's that is the dynamic which has worked for me in a networking scenario. And so I've kind of created a little corner of a world which, you know, allows me to play happily, but I think very, very principally, you know, sort of benefits other people. You know, like this only
Yeah,
works.
and it clearly it clearly works. Like, well done you. So you are literally engaged with thousands of marketing professionals. And we were speaking earlier about the various changes that we're seeing within marketing. So can I ask, what patterns are you seeing in senior leaders who are really thriving at the moment? Are there any kind of common themes?
I think something I've become really passionate about is the boring stuff. And possibly the most boring statement I can say is that if people can't see the progress, then they stop believing. And by people, I mean the rest of the organization.
Yeah.
And surfacing the wins and doing internal communication is, I'd propose, like half the job, you know, maybe even 60% of the job. I feel like the best leaders have an awareness that they're not just marketing to their customers are also the rest of the team. And with that thought in mind, then they get the ability, once they've sort of shown some wins and surfacing the small wins as well as the big ones along the way, they get the belief, they get the buy-in, they get the relationships from the rest of the team. And folks go, cool, I know what you're doing. I've seen you win, so let's do more of that.
Okay.
I've seen the example in my own team in the past few weeks. So we're running a conference in a few weeks' time, and we had a thing where we're selling tickets in the background, and the tickets were selling, which was great. But the rest of the team didn't know about it, and it's because only myself and my head of events had access to the ticketing platform. And so I created like a little Zapier automation, which every time we sold a ticket, it just surfaced it to the team in Slack. And like every one of those moments became like a little celebration. And the difference was that that momentum actually existed already, but it just wasn't being celebrated. And now everyone can see it, so everyone celebrates it, and we feel great. And so like it's a feeling thing, but I think that internal communication is huge.
Okay, so that's a really positive tip that you kind of observed there. What about any challenges that you're seeing that are appearing as kind of common gaps for senior marketing and leaders?
I wouldn't characterize it as a gap. I would describe it as one of our biggest challenges, which is
Okay.
simply saying no. And I think that works on a couple of levels. The first is a coherent strategy. So, you know, I think we're both professed Ritson fan people on this chat, and so we don't need to go into a lot of detail. But one of the great Michael Porter quotes is, "A great strategy is about saying no." I think there's a second element to this, though, which probably gets discussed a little bit less, which is the confidence to say no. And the reason why that is tricky is that marketing is such an interesting role in that we are constantly being asked to justify ourselves in a way that very few other departments are being asked to justify.
Very true.
And the result is that, like, you can be emotionally battered as much as you can be sort of like, you know, spreadsheet battered. And so that confidence to go to a CEO who sort of says, we should do X, Y, Z, and sort of say, I don't think that's the right idea because we've agreed a strategy, or indeed being a bit more diplomatic and taking someone on the journey, that's a hell of a skill. And in terms of that gap, that's probably the gap or the opportunity or the challenge, whichever word we want to choose. But I think that's probably where we need to be. focusing a little bit more. So it's very much in line with the positive, which is the
Yeah.
internal communication, but it's the other side of it, I think.
And culture plays a massive impact on
Huge.
both of those things in terms of internal communication and, to your point, having the confidence to say no. Some cultures make that an awful lot easier than others. But
Totally.
it's a
Absolutely.
really good point.
You're very spot on.
We've talked about networking and communities. I'm a big believer that they are really important for accelerating career growth. It's great just for positivity, confidence, mindset, the whole thing. Do you have any tips as to, it's not a natural thing for everyone to go network. To your point, you said that you're personally quite shy. Do you have any tips for marketers who aren't doing it currently and they're thinking, okay, they're listening to this would be a good idea. I am going to invest in sort of networking and communities, how they would go about doing that?
Yeah. I think you used a really interesting word in the question there, which was invest. And I'd probably encourage folks to think about that word quite a lot, in a couple of ways. So when we speak about invest, then one inevitably thinks about currency. And I would probably suggest that a completely underrated thing in networking scenarios is that the currency of community is opportunity, which means to say that you may go to one networking event and feel like, oh my God, it was so rubbish.
Yeah.
You may go to another one and say, you know what, that was great, but I didn't get any business off the back of it. But there is a third world, which is like, there is an opportunity which you cannot see on a spreadsheet, but which will transform your life. And that's the gift of humanity as much as anything else, right? I was speaking about this with my friend Max yesterday, who's become one of my best friends in the entire world. And like our story arc together has sort of happened over the past 7 years, where he came to the Marketing Meetup event. He dropped me a message beforehand and actually asked if he could speak. And I said, no, you should come along and you should feel it and you should do all that. And Max and I, just over a series of WhatsApps last night, sort of reflected on a series of steps which actually saw him becoming my mate, me recommending him to the Marketing Academy after I'd done the Marketing Academy, him eventually going on to start a public speaking business which now works with the Marketing Academy, as a series of steps which could all be traced back to that first event in Manchester. And so when you speak about that word invest, then I think that's probably a right word to sort of think about, which is that mindset. I'm investing in myself, I'm investing in opportunity. And, investments don't pay off today or tomorrow necessarily. They can pay off in the long term. And so just relaxing your shoulders a little bit, trying to enjoy it. But then another way to think about the word invest is investing in the community, not just looking to take, but looking to give. And if you can do that and sort of create this dynamic for yourself where you are seen as someone helpful, someone looking to benefit others, I think you're giving yourself the best shot to sort of survive and have a good time in the networking situation, for sure.
I really agree. And it's definitely about investment. I would encourage people to be doing it as early in their career as possible.
Totally.
I think that's super important. So anyone who's listening to this who isn't currently part of the Marketing Meetup but wants to come along, how does it work? What do they need to do? Where do they need to look to kind of get access to that?
So we show up in too many ways. We run weekly webinars, which are more educational. So often you'll see titles which are like how to do ... They're free to attend. They're online. Sign up is on the Marketing Meetup website. We hold about 160 in-person events around the world. They're likewise on the Marketing Meetup event. And I'm quite proud they're not just like London, like we've got a Fleet event. I've never been to Fleet, but like we do that and it's fabulous. So like, particularly if you're in the UK, there's a decent chance there'll be an event around you. If you're just looking to dip your toe in, then our newsletter or social media is probably the places to go. And So the newsletter is likewise found on the website, social media in the obvious places. Two more ways. So we have our podcasts. So we have the Marketing Meetup podcast, which is a recording from our webinars. And then we have something called Your CMO Mentor. The premise of Your CMO Mentor is we go out to amazing senior folks and ask them to act as a mentor for the community en masse, which is lovely. Final thing is that we have an annual conference. So 400 people in the shadow of Westminster. Last year's was the first time we ever did it, and ended up with an NPS of like 98, which was just wild and wonderful. So folks would be most invited to that as well. That happens in March time.
Well, congratulations. You've built something that's truly valuable to the community. Yeah, I love the fact that you built it from a really honest, authentic, wanting to help support people. And that's why it's been so successful, Joe. Amazing. Absolutely fantastic. Just to finish this off, we always ask someone about advice that they've been given that they would kind of recommend to others. Is there a piece of advice that you have been given over the years that you think would potentially benefit others?
Mm-hmm. So I was fortunate enough to go on the Marketing Academy as a scholar in 2020. We did a program called The Living Leader, and I was fortunate enough to sit down with Sherilyn. So Sherilyn Shackle was our coach for those few days. One of the main premises of the Living Leader program is 4 words, which is, it's not about you. And that became like the most transformational leadership advice that I've ever received, because it transforms how you show up for others. But there is an appendix to that particular sentence, which I learned over the years, because I think I went a little bit too far on it's not about you.
Okay.
Which is, it's not about you, but sometimes it is. Which means to say that in my own journey, and I speak about this often, then anxiety and depression were an element and part of my own journey. And by adopting the it's not about you mindset entirely, then sometimes you forget that you just need to look after yourself as well. And so particularly at the moment when we recognize that the industry is in the not always wonderful space, just exhibiting a bit of self-care and sort of realizing that, yes, it's not about you. That is the best leadership advice I've ever got. But sometimes it is, and that's okay too. And just kind of being okay with both. Like, absolutes rarely serve us, but finding the nuance and where you are day to day is often a good place to be.
Joe, thank you. A really wonderful, honest, open answers to the questions. I'm sure it will be very, very well enjoyed by our listeners. Thank you very much for your time.
No problem at all. Appreciate you. Thank you for having me.
Pleasure.